Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal, Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today we're going out to the Florida National Cemetery to pay our respects to a man that I knew as a big-time wrestler from the 80s. His name at the time was Hercules Hernandez, but he was actually born Raymond Fernandez, and he has quite a story. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. Hey there, Ja. Taking our favorite co-host with us today, aren't we? You gonna help out with this vlog? I know. This is the same veteran cemetery we went to before. Blackjack Mulligan is buried there. The Gerber baby. Also, not saying Blackjack Mulligan was the Gerber baby. This cemetery is very helpful because they have a kiosk here that you can look up who you're here to visit, and it'll guide you to their grave if you're not familiar with it. Well, normally they have a gravesite locator. Unfortunately, this says that it's out of order to go inside, but they're closed inside, so I'm going to see if I can figure something out from clues online. Alright, after looking at Find a Grave, he's in 325, which looks like it is right down here at the very bottom. So let me see where we are. We're right up here. So we'll go and take that to Appalachie Way all the way to the very back where the columbariums are. Alright, we're gonna make the second left. So there's our first left. Had a very short life. Only lived to be 47 years old. Not uncommon with those 80s wrestlers, unfortunately. A lot of abuse on the body. Free car wash. Okay, it should be not too far around the bend. We just passed 321. Alright, 325, and he is number 558, which means probably going to be pretty close to the very back. So the road is over here where we entered. He's all the way back here in the very corner. This is the grave of Raymond C. Fernandez, A1 U.S. Air Force, May 7th, 1956 to March 6th, 2004. You see it says the Mighty Hercules. Beloved father. Yeah, he was a father of 7. He was born in New York, and his mother died when he was 6, so his father moved the family to Tampa, and he was raised here in Tampa. When he was in high school, he was in love with wrestling. Not just television wrestling, but he was an actual wrestler with the high school program and was really, really good. So when he graduated high school, he decided to enlist in the Air Force, which is what he did. Served 3 years in the Air Force, and then when he came out, he sought out Hiro Matsuda to see if he could become a professional wrestler. And Hiro Matsuda was famous for being a trainer. Some of the ways that he would test people, like, well, one that he famously tested was Terry Bollea, who became Hulk Hogan. When Terry came to him, Hiro Matsuda broke his leg to see if he was serious about it. He didn't do that to Raymond Fernandez, but he did see something in Raymond and decided to take him on and train him. and he was also the one that gave him the name, helped him become the Mighty Hercules, or as he would be known most of the time, Hercules Hernandez. Now, you don't get the name Hercules by being a small guy. He was always a big guy, and he would start his wrestling career by wrestling at the weight of 275, pretty much solid muscle most of his entire career. Now, he got started in Florida and kind of cut his teeth there learning how the business worked. Would get teamed up in a tag team. Then he would go off and wrestle in Texas. And then after a couple of years of learning the business, he ended up in the NWA and became tag team champions there, as well as becoming the TV champion. Now, when you were the TV champion, you had to defend your title every week. So this forced him to go out and be a good entertainer weekly. And it was at this time that he ended up having his famous feud with Harley Race. And this was a feud that lasted for a long time. I mean, he was champion for 6 months and then had this feud with Harley Race, and it ended up culminating in this gigantic steel cage match where, you know, Hercules Hernandez held his own, and even though Harley Race prevailed, it kind of made in the business, as far as the territories, it made Hercules a sought-after name. So he was wrestling all over the territories for years, then eventually ended up out in Florida again, then was out in Japan where they worked a little bit stiffer and hit a little bit harder, which was the style that he liked. And of course, because of that, he was a pretty big star over there, and was brought back over here, back over to the United States to work Georgia Championship Wrestling. He had a good run there, so he was brought back down to Florida. And while he was in Florida, he ended up becoming tag team champion again. He was one of the masked assassins. He eventually ended up having a falling out with Chief Wahoo McDaniel. They had an actual fight outside of kayfabe, and he ended up taking off and went to Puerto Rico and became a big star in Puerto Rico. And while he was down there, that's when Vince McMahon Jr., who was just starting up the WWF, came and signed him to become the Brute Hercules for WWF. Hercules was pretty much always billed as a heel. When he first came in, he was managed by Classy Freddie Blassie, which kind of tells you a lot right there. He was one of the dirtiest managers in the game, and he was with him for a while, and he kind of helped get him started. But then he would eventually be sold over to Slick, and Slick would become his manager. And those were great days because Slick was a great mouthpiece. And Hercules wasn't so great on the mic. He was just really physically amazing. He looked good. For a big guy, he was very agile and could move well in the ring. He could take a lot of bumps. He could lift big guys, so he was very impressive. So he didn't need to win. Just the things he did in the ring, as long as he made the other guys look good, then that's really, you know, kind of all the WWF really seemed to have a plan for. Because they brought him in, he worked WrestleMania 2 with Ricky Steamboat, and Ricky Steamboat said, you know, the guy had the biggest heart in the world, he was the nicest guy, but he was just so nervous for that he was really stiff. And so when you hit him, it was like hitting someone made of iron. So he did well there, and then they put him in a feud with Billy Jack Haynes, and that lasted for quite a while, and then they ended up culminating that in WrestleMania 3. But after that, they really, kind of the only thing they were really doing was they put him with Hulk Hogan in a Saturday Night Main Event, and he looked really good there, so it looked like, you know, he actually made it look like he was gonna win. So people kind of got behind him, and they started to push him for a little bit, but it didn't last very long. It wasn't, you know, but just maybe a couple of months before he would have a feud with Haku that was pretty good. But then he just became basically a jobber for bigger guys like Ultimate Warrior. He would have that chain tug of war with Ultimate Warrior. And then Earthquake and Mr. Perfect, but with all these guys, he was always losing. So it's kind of sad to see, you know, even though he was big and everything, they never really had a plan for him to be a champion in any way with WWF. But he eventually ended up taking off. I mean, he had done some good work. He'd done some good programs. One where Bobby Heenan was his manager and sold his contract to Ted DiBiase, and Ted DiBiase was basically saying that Hercules was now his slave. And so Hercules stood up for himself and said, I'm no man's slave and I'm my own man. And but then they programmed him with Virgil instead of, you know, to like that was the way he would, you know, show his manlyhood or whatever, was to beat Virgil. So it never really went anywhere. And then eventually Paul Roma came up with a plan. Paul said that they were traveling together, even though Paul was, you know, a face and Herc was a heel. They would travel together. Then one day he said, we have nothing going on, why don't we team up? So those were the days when we got Power and Glory. And he said that was, Paul Roma said that was his idea. He went to Vince McMahon and basically explained what it was and said, you know, obviously, you know, Hercules will be the Power and I'll be the Glory, so, you know, Hercules will never get pinned. If, you know, if anyone ever gets pinned, it'll be me. But also, because I'm Glory, every time Hercules looks like he could win, he'll always come and tag me so that I get the win. And he said originally they were going to be bad guys, but they were getting such a good pop when they would go out there that they converted them to being face wrestlers. And then Legion of Doom signed, and any momentum that the guys had with Power and Glory was basically killed at WrestleMania 7 when they had Power and Glory lose to the Legion of Doom in less than a minute match. So Paul Roma ended up leaving the WWE, and Hercules stuck around for a little bit longer, but then eventually he left and went off to WCW, where he would wrestle with a mask, and it looked like his career was kind of in a decline. But then he went and wrestled back in Japan and signed up with All Japan and had a pretty good tag team run there. They formed this amazing tag team called the Jurassic Powers, and it was Scott Norton and Hercules Hernandez, two of the biggest, toughest guys in wrestling. So they were able to just mow people down, and they were pretty physical and pretty violent, and that's what Japanese wrestling fans loved. So they were really successful there for a while, had their run, and then eventually, you know, the time came. He came back to the United States, and the wrestling business had changed so much, there was really no place for him at WWE or WCW, so he was doing the independent circuit, and then just called it quits in 1999. He had wrestled for 20 years, and that's a lot of physical abuse to put on your body, in conjunction with he was very well known for doing pills, doing steroids. A lot of the guys back then were doing a lot of stuff for painkillers, and unfortunately ended up taking his life at an early age of 47. March 6th, the evening of March 6th, he was found dead in his sleep, and it was heart disease. Greg Nammer Valentine just said simply his heart blew up. The guy abused his body for so much that it eventually just caught up with him. And there was an interview with the Warlord, and he said that, you know, for as nice a guy as Herc was, like, everybody had nice things to say about him. He just said he always was a guy that was doing pills or doing something, and that, you know, definitely you pay for it on the back end. I remember Warlord telling a story about them being on a plane, and Hercules had taken some pills and taken a few drinks on the plane and passed out, and somebody came over to try and wake him, and he put the woman in a headlock, and then the flight attendant came out and tried to talk to him, and he put him in a headlock, and just, you know, crazy days. But unfortunately he passed away, as the Warlord said, kind of almost homeless with 7 children. It's a rough business, man. It is a rough business. Apparently Raymond Fernandez had a passion for dogs, and used to train dogs. And so Macho Man Randy Savage got his last dog from Hercules, and the dog's name was Hercules. So shortly before Macho Man had his unforeseen death, where he was driving and basically also had a heart attack and crashed and died, his dog Hercules, who he had gotten from Hercules, had passed away, and that was his best friend. So he scattered the ashes under a tree on his property, and that way he would be able to come out and see Hercules all the time. And then when Randy passed away, and you know, really nobody foresaw that coming, they decided to also scatter his ashes under that same tree with his dog Hercules. So kind of an interesting tie-in with all of these guys. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night. Rest in peace, Hercules Hernandez, or you know, when I watched, you were just the great Hercules. Rest in peace, Raymond Fernandez. Goodbye.